Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in 3 ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Vlad and Mark. They both did a case study on Pavel Datsyuk, talking about the learning, development, and becoming the magic man. So welcome, gentlemen. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit further here for the listeners.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Vlad. I'm currently based in Finland, but was born and raised in Russia. Moved to Finland 10 years ago, played hockey, studied hockey coaching, coached, and at the moment quite passionate about connecting academia and sports. So how can sports science help the coaches and the people that are working in the field? And greetings from Finland, and Mark, over to you.
Okay, hello. My name is Mark O'Sullivan. I'm originally from Cork City in Ireland, but I've been living in Stockholm in Sweden for over 25 years. At present, I am one of the heads of development today at K Youth Football. I specifically focus on the 8 to 12 age groups, but I do education, coach education, player education for across the club. Also, I helped set up the club's research and development department, which is the first, research department in a soccer club in all of Scandinavia. Also finishing off my doctorate, my PhD at the moment, and I'm a published researcher, specifically in the area of how we can research sports organizations and clubs, and in the area of learning, design, and pedagogy mainly in invasion sports.
All right. That sounds like a mouthful for some of our less inclined to the research studies, but no, I like this. I think we're going to get into a lot of good areas. But let's start with our hockey specifics. So we'll go to Vlad first on this one. Just talking about the environment that was in Russia as Datsyuk was growing up was heavily involved by Anatoly Tarasov, the father of Russian hockey. So in your thoughts, how did Tarasov set up the system to work, and what were some of his big philosophies and big pillars?
Well, I would say, thinking about the youth sports, the Tarasov was big believer that we need to engage as many young athletes as possible and keep them in the sport. So he was quite a big fan of promoting the sport within youth from all over the country have been exposed to such tournament, which is called the Golden Puck, where every yard team from any city of Soviet Union at the time were able to compete against each other. And then, of course, there have been local competitions where the kids, even from little cities like in getting exposure to the sport of ice hockey. Obviously, climate helped in the winters in Russia, and the big prize was to come to Moscow and play in the arena for the in front of the coaches, in front of the other professional players that played in Moscow. But nevertheless, let's look at Coach Tarasov as a person in general at first. as he comes from a similar background as Mark, actually, that he's coming from football. Originally, he was a football coach, but upon his graduation, when ice hockey started to develop in Russia, he was tasked to develop the national system, because Tarasov played both. He played football and ice hockey, which was quite common at the time, that biggest stars in football or soccer, they were typically playing two sports. In summer, they would be in football, and in winter, they would be playing ice hockey. So if you think about like that, how well developed their hockey IQ was, so to say, and or game IQ just in general, as both of the sports have, of course, their own demands. Nevertheless, invasion game is an invasion game where the principles are more similar than different, and so that became one of his key, I would say, characteristics as a coach, that he was quite passionate about connecting his knowledge of football and with ice hockey. And of course, at the time, one of the big sports was bandy, or which is played on a big ice surface similar to the football pitch. So the athletes would be required to skate significantly more kilometers per game than they are in ice hockey. Nevertheless, the Canadian version of hockey, so to say, when it came, it was a good challenge, as Tarasov mentioned, to identify what are the key qualities that are needed. But nevertheless, your game understanding is something that is useful regardless of the sport that you play. So therefore, he is known to connect not only football but also basketball, ballet, weightlifting, and each and every sport that would help an ice hockey player. I would say, if we would think about Coach Tarasov and his key quality, I would say I would call it innovator and a pioneer. Bring in any possible resource that would help develop ice hockey players and or ice hockey teams.
I think there was an interesting thing that we actually came across after we published the research paper on Pavel Datsyuk, was that Tarasov in the late 40s was working for a time in Hungarian football. And this is this great team that kind of emerged from the late 40s and the early 50s, a very innovative football team where they kept changing positions with each other, had very dynamic way of playing. And it was basically the birth of, if you want to call it, total football. So I think that it was interesting that Tarasov was there. And I think he took a lot of these ideas with him into hockey. So you have this kind of more total hockey, a more dynamic way of playing hockey, because from my understanding, it was up until the Tarasov managed to get his, what we call it, red machine going. And I don't like the word machine because that's so mechanistic. It's really a very much dynamic system, the Soviet hockey team. They're very dynamic. They weren't mechanistic. But he challenged a lot of the linear ways of playing that was very dominant in the USA and Canada at the time. They had very linear ways of playing. And I think it's really interesting, this transfer. There was kind of a cultural inheritance from other sports, and particularly from his time in Hungary, I think, especially as I am a student of football. I know a lot about the Hungarian teams in the 50s, and they were quite dynamic and it was the birth of total football. So I think that's something we found out after, and kind of regret we didn't beforehand.
Yeah, and how did for you, is it just the positions being very flexible that was the key component within the Hungarians, or was it some of the ways they trained? Because obviously there's components of both of those, how you train to do that and the flexibility and what it allows you to do. So I'm curious to hear more about, was it just that or more than that?
football very much at the time, particularly, was very much structured in this. You're a defender, you're a midfielder, you're a back, or whatever. And I think the Hungarians, there's a famous game they played at Wembley. I think it's in the early 50s, and they beat England 7-3 or something at Wembley. And this is really quite a shock for England, because they've never come up against teams that actually constantly switch positions. So sometimes the centre back would be going into midfield, and the centre forward is dropping into the centre midfield, and the wingers are coming inside. So it's kind of, and they have this thing called the false nine, which Lionel Messi is known for. That was already in the Hungarian team in the 50s. So, and they had this more dynamic, inventive approach, and I really think that's what Tarasov really took with him back to Russia. What wasn't as linear or structured or prescribed by the coach. You know, it was more providing opportunities for players to maybe express their skills a bit more and interchange positions. And I mean, it must have been a very exciting time, actually, when you think of it.
It really did. I mean, being able to start something almost from scratch with how he built up the Russian system must have been exciting. And I had Sean Skinner, who works over in Russia quite often, on the podcast earlier. He mentioned that at one point, Tarasov, being the man that researches as much as he possibly can, wanted to challenge that you needed ice time to improve your team. And he actually took two groups, and one was able to practice and they did their own thing. And he took the other group and they did nothing but off ice. And then they only had like 2 weeks of on ice training. And then they played a game against each other. And what used to be a very even match, by the end of it, was all about the team that trained off the ice in all of these different ways that really dominated with the play.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. If there's any literature or anything available on that, that'd be really cool.
I heard a similar story. Nevertheless, like I would be also curious to hear more details about what kind of training was there. Was it just the athleticism development, or was it ball games to actually teach hockey?
Yeah, we'll have to dig into that another time. I don't have any of that off the top of my head, but I just think it's a fascinating little story to.
We should call Sean again.
Yes, we should. So dovetailing that into Pavel, let's maybe start to open that up a little bit further. Maybe not all the way open quite yet, but maybe what would be a quick background of his hockey journey from picking up a stick to playing in the NHL? What did that look like for him?
Vlad, I think before, I think you're in a better position to answer this, but I think before we answer, we need to make something, kind of set a framework around this. And that is a lot of what we're trying to speak about is that there's these ideas that skill is learned, is only influenced by what you do in practice and with a coach, but there's actually a whole socio-cultural context that influences how people move. There's a reason why Brazilians move on a football pitch a lot different than the Irish football players. And they have the jing and the capoeira, the sway. So there's a whole cultural context. And that's what we were digging into here with Pavel, that there was some sort of cultural context that was influencing how he was learning to play hockey. And I think Vlad can, and it's just an important thing to frame here, that it's not just about, just because you do a certain amount of practice and do all these skills that you become a great hockey player. There's a lot of, let's say, unseen influences from the culture that also influence how you learn.
Yes, and I would love to dive into that. I think we should start with the story of Tarasov, the background, move on to Pavel's thing, and then dive into the different elements and how that was good learning. I don't want to give it away too early, but maybe good learning environments and cues that were given to him or unstructured that were given to him, and we can have a full-on discussion on that. So let's hold our horses ever so slightly, but I like how we framed this.
For sure, but nevertheless, I would say if we would keep it brief, that the Pavel started to play in his hometown in Yekaterinburg, and he played in numerous teams, including the yard team and the one that was more related to the sports school, and his progression was more or less going from the youth program, then going into the juniors, and then playing within the men's system in his hometown. Then he went on to play to Kazan, and then this is the time when he was drafted to Red Wings. And then I think from that time forward, everyone is quite aware what has been happening with Pavel, with the Stanley Cups and national team appearances, and his last few years in the KHL.
Yep, absolutely. So he basically started small town, and it slowly aggregated up, but not too quickly, on how that all came about. So I think this might be a good start for either of you, maybe Mark, just in the contextual background of the socioeconomic that he came from, because he did not come from a well-off family in Russia that could just give him as much training and private tutoring as possible.
Yeah,
frankly speaking, Mark, sorry, I will jump in with one crucial cultural detail. Back in the time, it was hard to be in a family that was pretty well off. Nevertheless, back in the time, individual tutoring and extra ice, I would say it was not exactly the trend, so to say. It did not even exist back in the day. And extra hour training was that you would play after school with your friends on a backyard.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned there the socioeconomic factors that had an influence. Of course, as we know at the time, it was I think the area Pavel come from, it was relatively scarce resources at the time. And Pavel says to us, he speaks a lot in the interview with us about the value he placed on equipment, that when you were given a new hockey stick, that it was something you cherished and valued, that it was often a hand-me-down stick from an older player or a senior player in the club or wherever you played. So the thing is that if you broke your stick, you could be waiting a while maybe before you get a new one because of the scarce resources. And I think this Pavel's adaptation to this was that he started adapting his way of playing to protect the puck and the stick, and he's to protect the stick and the puck, as he says himself in the interview. So this very unorthodox way of playing ice hockey emerged under these socioeconomic constraints because of how he himself adapted to it. So we found this was a very interesting theme that came out of this. And again, it kind of comes back to our main argument is that skill emerges under specific constraints at different levels, out in the level of culture, but also at the level of practice, because his coaches were highly influenced by Tarasov. So the pedagogical way they worked in the training sessions on the ice was very much probably not breaking the players by telling them exactly what to do all the time, but giving them enough freedom to explore their decision-making possibilities under different game situations, under different dynamics. And I think there were two key things for me that stood out. So here we had a young guy learning, adapting his way of playing to protect his stick so it doesn't get broken, because he's very clearly states that he never really did slap shots because it would put the stick at risk. So, and then we had these coaches then that were really supportive of players, giving them a lot of autonomy in the training to make their own decisions. So I think that there were two very main points for me that I picked up. And what about you, Vlad?
I would say, it's not just him that was, in that situation where the equipment was scarce. It was quite a lot of kids. Nevertheless, if we think about the deeper meaning, so to say, that when you connect to that particular constraint in a different way, that for some it might have not have been an issue that I'm without a stick for numerous months. It's okay for me, so I could play and I could put it at the high danger zones when I could be slashed or someone could could step on it. Nevertheless, for him as a person on the individual level, it was quite important to keep it protected. So it might potentially also shed the light on his motivation to stay in the game, so to say, that hey guys, I want to play the game and I need the equipment to do so, both skates and the stick, so that was one of the extensions of what we wrote with Mark.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I also think then if you add in the how he developed his, if we just speak about Pavel, his athletic skills, we'll say, all these made up games that they had on the ice. And of course, it was all different. The surface of the ice was constantly changing, different times of the year. They were cleaning the ice, or it was soft, snow on it. So there was a lot of environmental challenges as well there, because the surfaces were different. And then sometimes they were playing without skates, they're playing in felt boots. So it became a big challenge to keep yourself balanced. And then they used to play football on the ice, and then sometimes he would like playing against younger players with very uneven numbers as well. So it was like, and I love that line he says, we were just like kids in Brazil. It was like ginga. He actually used that word in the interview himself, ginga, which is this sway movement of playfulness associated with Brazil. And it's really funny that Pavel used that in the interview. We were just like kids.
And then the question was that, Mark, that when he was asked that with what kind of ball would you typically play, he answered that whichever one we had. Basically, like whatever we had. Sometimes it was with the hole, sometimes it was wooden, sometimes it was some old tennis ball. So it was, regardless of what the object was, let's keep the game going, so to say, and let's not break sticks as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's as we're starting to dive into this a little bit further, there's a lot of environmental factors that played into how Pavel was thinking about playing the game. And also for our listeners, I want to take a second. When we talk about pedagogy, we're talking about the art of teaching. Mark, did I get that proper?
Yeah, I kind of, it's teaching and learning.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page here. So you have all of these environmental factors, social economic factors playing into it. When you think about development through learning environments, which is kind of what we're getting at here, what benefits were the Tarasov system providing him as he's trying to learn these things?
I think Mark touched on it a little bit earlier, that the creativity and the ability of play, not exactly positionless hockey, but more or less the ability to fill in for your friend if needed, and to find creative solutions that may not be normal, so to say, in ice hockey terms. And like every play by Datsyuk, not every play, the majority of his plays are quite outstanding, to say the least. So when you're in the process of continuous search and continuous exploration of, okay, how else I can fool my opponent to make sure that I either pass through him or I can score. So I think it leaves a mark on you as a player. And I would say, and another thing, what is crucial when we think about the connection of the Tarasov's philosophy and Pavel's development is the multi-sport background of his. And when he was asked that what are the other sports that you like to play, he said any sport that involves friends and the ball. And typically he likes team sports because you can involve more people to play.
No, I think it's somewhat legacy as well, isn't it? Because this multi-sport providing opportunities for children to take part in other sports as well, if they want. It's not forcing them, providing invitation to take part. And I think it was just it was almost like they were tuning into the culture, in some way, that it was like, and I think it's fascinating, and that it was a line, and even the way that Tarasov refers to technique as art, as well. He mentions, isn't it, the word technique was art. He mentions this in his book. It's very artistic about how you do things, and in the way, art is not about doing something the right way. There is not one correct way to do art either. We must remember this. It's so many different forms of expression.
Tarasov was quite a well-read person, so in his way, how he describes things, he definitely has a note of artistic approach to things. Yeah. And this is where what I told you, that from the ways how he expresses his vision of stick handling, he doesn't say the skill of stick handling, he says the art of stick handling, that he was good at the art of stick handling when he describes, for example, Valery Kharlamov, when it comes to his style of play.
Yeah, but I think an important point here then, when you speak about art, again, we're back to, it's not everyone does art the exact same way. So the art of stick handling for me and the art of stick handling for you may not be the exact same way of handling a stick, but it's got to do with who our own, let's say, physical individual constraints, height, weight, muscle, how we skate, etc. So the art of actually holding, of stick handling, is probably so individualistic as well. And I'm kind of getting this intuition about that's what Tarasov was really on about when he was speaking about this.
For sure.
Yeah, and it was, and the reason why I feel like so many people love Pavel is how unique he was in his skill set. There are so many players that can play the game very similarly, but he does not play it the same as everyone else. He sees it very differently, which is the exciting element. And where I kind of want to go with this is the idea of players that have success one way often like to go back to that same exact well and continue to do it that way. How does a player get creative? Like free play, maybe it's boredom, I tried this out, but it's same, at some point, a lot of these people, they like to win. And if you have something that works for you, a lot of times everyone's had a player like this. They do the exact same thing, whether it be driving wide or over relying on one asset. Meanwhile, you've got players like Pavel Datsyuk who've got this creativity. They've got multiple ways to beat you. Like, where does that come up? Because I've seen guys released on a pond and they just go back to the same thing over and over, and it's not much development, even though it is free play.
Vlad, any thoughts on
that? Well, my thinking comes at that when you're faced with certain, say, like with the certain problem that you're trying to solve, there are certainly, there is only X amount of ways how you can solve it that would that would be within your repertoire, but it doesn't mean that it would be the same repertoire for the mark. So therefore, if we think about say, like, one of the skills that I would say that helped Pavel to be creative is simply his playfulness, that he wants to outplay an opponent, and then he will look for any possible way how to do it. If that's one way that works, then I'll be using that way. The moment when the door shuts on for example, on a cutback move, I can try something else on you. And this is what we've mentioned, that it comes from within the player, that just like the meaning of equipment. So similarly, I believe within his learning in development was that he, like, we know that his friends were demanding from him that he would pass to them instead of scoring on his own. So that was I would say one of the things that have been guiding his thinking, that hey, in this situation I can fake that I'm shooting to score, but now I'm going to give a pass with a backhand. Next time I'm going to do something else if that's not going to be an option. So and thinking that when you are playing how he mentioned with his friend against the team of younger players, 2 versus 12 or 2 versus 15, there is not so much time for you to think about a certain solution that you would like to use. You just basically read and react to what the environment offers to you. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the possibly when I've studied the videos there is that it was very hard for opponents to read Pavel's intentions. I think because his skills were so unorthodox and he was so adaptable in passing, and you never knew how he was going to pass, from where he was going to pass or when. So he was very good at, I guess, disguising his intentions in some way, and also he was good at, as you said, like he might intend to pass through a gap, but suddenly the door closes. He's so adaptable to then passing somewhere else quickly in that moment. He's so attuned to the environment. And I think some players, then the issue is that they may be very young, they succeed with one thing that's really good and works for them. But then people get to understand what their intentions are and read their intentions very well. And so it ends up that what once worked for these players doesn't work anymore, because it becomes their intentions become too predictable. I think that's all these games that Pavel played, the coaches he had that offered him the opportunities to express themselves, their own decision making, the unorthodox stick handling style and puck management style, let's say, that emerged under social cultural constraints. It was kind of almost like a perfect storm. And within that storm, it was very hard to figure out his intentions. I can imagine what it must be like for maybe a hockey player that's come through a very linear player development system to meet him, probably looking at what is he doing? You know,
yeah.
His intentions must be very, very hard to read.
And if we recall from the interview, Pavel is very analytical as a person. Yeah. That in a way how he described that, you know, when they played, for example, in felt boots, that he knows from the get-go that my opponent cannot stop. So yeah. I would then use in that particular game, I would be using and at times abusing the stop fakes and or making the fakes going the other way. But then again, when I go back to playing hockey with the skates on, when someone can stop, so then I need to look for other ways how to do it. But nevertheless, the cutback or let someone slip by me is still an option. Yeah. But now it has a bit more risk, and let's face it, that creativity typically comes to us through struggle. That sometimes that move works, sometimes it doesn't. But the key thing is to keep on doing it, keep on thinking what things I need to read and where is the angle that I could use to slip the puck through the skates or the stick.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing for me is everyone talks about the game being the teacher, but at the same point, not everyone, especially for some of the younger kids, are very good at being self-diagnosing, self-reflective, and that analytic piece. And I think that is probably the key component to unlocking creativity, is thinking through those things, because some kids are not there yet, or they're not aware of themselves. And I think when we talk about a guy like Pavel, like there's this self-reflection, there is a self-awareness in what you're doing and how that affects others. Oh, yeah. And I think that's, for me, and Mark, you're way more studied than I ever will be. Maybe I'd love your opinion, because you're coming from it, maybe not just a hockey perspective, but also all of these different sports, on where does that fit into helping when we put these kids in these environments to actually push them forward and into that.
I would, a lot of the work I'm doing, because I'm a coach as well, so it's not just a researcher, so I'm actually researching what I'm doing. I think it's about very much designing environments for young kids to search, discover, and exploit opportunities to do stuff. So in how I would recommend when we work with kids, I just had a training session now. You know, we might have a session where we shine a light on passing, but we do not remove the opportunity to dribble. Because if you only pass, there's no opportunity to dribble, then there's no decision. So a lot of the sessions I would design, You just might slightly design it so that there's a lot of opportunities to pass, but that does not mean you're removing the opportunities to dribble. So we use this very simple framework, and Vlad I know, used this in ice hockey as well. And I guess in football, it would be ball, or an ice hockey puck, opponent or opponents, direction, mean we're going somewhere. Consequence, mean if we lose the ball or the puck, the opponents can score. And then the information is representative of the game. So a classic, maybe, actually funny, I was speaking with an ice hockey coach who just did exactly this, and he was showing me, and he said, yeah, we're playing 3 against 3 and shoot. All 3 players must touch the puck before you can score a goal. Why would you want to do that? That's not representative of the game. That's not representative information. All you have to do is just stand around one player. You don't have to bother about the other 2. So even though there is a puck, opponent, direction, and there is a consequence because you can lose the ball, the opponents can do something, the information is not representative. So what I would suggest is that in training designs, make sure there's opportunities for kids to search, to discover, and exploit opportunities for action, and that the information they're working on is representative of information they have in the performance context. And you can exaggerate some of that information without removing something. We call it amplifying and dampening, amplifying opportunities to pass without dampening the opportunities to dribble too much. So it's kind of this constant balancer going on. And you're right, the game is not the teacher. I don't think the game is the teacher. It's far too complex than a game being a teacher.
Yeah, that's my biggest bone to pick right now within the hockey community is how many times I hear, let the game be the teacher. I'm like, yes, it is a teacher in some shape and form, but it is not the only teacher. Like, there has to be cues in here.
Maybe how the kids are playing the game can teach the coach what he needs to work with.
Now you're cooking with peanut oil, as my one friend says. I like where we're heading with this. Vlad, you want to take us home on this point?
Well, there is exactly what Mark has described, and in my coaching, and that definitely a framework that helps you to identify the crucial things that you want to keep in mind when you design a training session. And one thing that is in Finland quite common is the logic of the game, is passing to every teammate. Is it part of the logic of the game? Well, to an extent, it's not. So then we can leave it out and look for things when we attempt to build a small area game, or for example, or a given drill. Look for things that are in line with the logic, that you don't need to over constrain, so to say, our in environments that the athletes are then trapped in, figuring out the rules of the game instead of actually focusing on learning and developing.
A great example of that that I like to use is every pass is an extra point, but you can still score at any time. So it's just adding up. So does it make sense in your risk reward, rather than you have to pass? You could pass, or you could just score right away, just depending on the risk reward, how you're going to go about that. I think that is an easy one for beginners or someone just getting down this path to start with. Mark's shaking his head over here like either it's really bad or really good.
Well, that you get a point for every pass. What happens if the goalkeeper goes and buys a hot dog and it's open? Like, why would you?
So sorry. It adds. So like if you score a goal, that's 1 point. But if you score a goal off a pass, that's 2 points. So each pass adds an extra point when you do score. So if you don't actually attack, you don't actually get any points.
Exactly. Yeah. So you get a point for every pass that leads to a goal. So if you do 4 passes and score,
that would be five points for the one team.
How realistic is that?
It's adding an incentive to look for the pass. So obviously it depends on where your team's at, but you can still score at any time and get your goal.
I would
say you get a breakaway, you're not looking behind you like, maybe I should pass.
Yeah, but why would you want to score 1 goal when you can get 4 goals if you pass 4 times? But then that doesn't happen in the game then. I think it's about exploiting. If the opponent is open, leaves it open. You know, if I was playing that game against you, I'd let you score. And then you get 1 point, and then me and Vlad would just keep passing each other and try and score.
Well, there's the risk reward. So at what point does it make no sense? When should you finally attack? Because it's great if you get 60 passes in and then you try to score, maybe the goalie stops you.
Yeah, I know, but I just wondering, what would that achieve? Are players just attuning to information to just pass for the sake of passing, to collect points, or are they not shooting to the space and the gaps that are opening up to punish mistakes and score? You see, so it's where you educating players' attention to there. You're not educating to the immediate danger. Maybe you're just educating it to, let's do a few passes and score.
Exactly. So rather than being linear, focused always on the goal. I mean, this is something, especially at the like ages where you start aggregating talent, where everyone was the best player and no one looks to play with each other. Well, you add that, now they're starting to at least look. Whether or not they take that, whole other story.
Yeah.
So it's the idea of getting the look and the scan in. That's the big component that we're looking for.
I think David Laszlo does it pretty well with differently colored pucks. That we don't take a look, at how many passes do I need to make to score X amount of points. But for example, if the green puck goes onto the ice, players know that it's +2 points or +3 points. And I believe the idea comes from the beloved NHL game that the kids nowadays play, and for them to experience the excitement that, hey, we're now doing in real life something what we do with our Xbox or PlayStation controllers. Or I think that certainly adds the spice, so to say. Yet at the same time, it doesn't compromise and the logic, so to say, and it doesn't get us into the discussion that are we making 60 or 40 passes, I guess.
Yeah, the red puck is the Ovechkin puck, so capitals, red Ovechkin, so you have to one-time that one to score.
For sure.
I love David Laszlo and his colored pucks. I know that Mike Bonelli sells those here in the States. That you can get a whole pack of all the different colors: red, orange, green, etc. It's a lot of fun.
We're in the business, Vlad.
Oh yeah.
Mark, you can't find these colors here.
Mark, we should make Datsyuk stick that breaks.
Yeah.
Can't take a one-timer, otherwise it'll break on you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So keeping up with this idea, and now that we've gone completely off the rail, I want to talk about just leaving room for improvisation and not over coaching. I feel like that's also an issue that you commonly see out there is coaches that want to control so much that it takes a lot of the creativity and decision making out of the players. And it's not like we're in society, and I know a lot of times here in the States where there is no free play realistically anymore. Like you're on to the next schedule, the next thing consistently. So how do we as coaches or as parents continue to help players develop this Pavel Datsyuk ability to improvise and read the environment quite well?
I guess the playfulness that has been now mentioned in numerous ways earlier, that is something that you should be after. Like for example, as a parent or as a coach, finding the ways how to integrate the games into our daily struggles, so to say, and would that be for example a few minutes at the beginning or at the end, because obviously nowadays we're overly constrained. Simply put, everyone expects to execute systems at under 12, so which is to an extent the reality that we need to battle with, and it's hard, as we all know. It's very hard to get rid of it completely. There are always coaches that want to play systems from the very young age, but nevertheless, if we think about like the Pavel's practice structure from what he described to us when he was in his primary school. It was that the first 20 minutes, it was the technical things, like they would do the skating exercises and or stick handling things, but nevertheless the remaining time they would be playing, and the coaches would be actually interacting with them. And how he says that the coaches would not break the picture of the game that you had in your imagination. So I guess this is where we come to the conversation then, if we chip in a few scientific terms in here. Affordance recognition from that perspective, that as it's known to an extent that it's not a natural process, that you don't just normally start to recognize things. So this is where that comes the art of coaching, that with the questions and or guiding points that you need to help your athletes to what things they should be dedicating their attention to in order to be able to make a certain move, or why that fake didn't work. Have you thought about this? Well, try that next time. And or, for example, hey, I really like this situation, even though it didn't work. Try this next time. And then through that active engagement, and not just passive, that good shot, good pass type of feedback, and like through the active, but at the same time non-linear process. This is where the magic of the magic men have been cooking, so to say.
I think I've just published another paper this week, sort of in this area, that there's a lot of there's a lot of traditional approaches to designing practice that we really need to start challenging. We are still very much in this deterministic way of designing tasks where we will limit unpredictability as much as possible. So the coach will limit the unpredictability as much as possible by over-instructing the young players. This is what you do. You pass to him and then to this person, then you take this movement or whatever. And this is very much, you could almost say it's quite Tayloristic, if you know what I mean by that. That's like the old conveyor belt model in the start of the Industrial Revolution, where every person was given a very individual task on the Ford car construction line. And this is almost like this reductionist approach is almost how we have for many years been working with designing practice, very reductionist. And I think we need to really go away from this. And this is the sort of the work I work in. So a very simple example would be if you're doing, let's say, we're going to do a 3v2 here. Why would a 3v2 happen for 2 minutes? It would never happen for 2 minutes in the game, a 3v2. It would happen for about 3 seconds because some other defender would come back and make it a 3v3. So can you design a task where it's 3v2, but with a delayed defender coming back, so the two players are working on a representative task, meaning how can we delay what these three are doing to give us, so our defender or our teammate can recover and make it 3v3. So that's what I'm thinking about, kind of more representative task designs. Also, I think there is traditionally in coaching, it's very much control over context. The coach is the person with the knowledge and it emits their knowledge to you about the game. But that's it. And back into the science of this is that's knowledge about. Just because I can tell you, I can't even skate, but I can tell you stuff in ice hockey that maybe you should do, but that doesn't mean I can do it. So very much it's this, just because some kid you can tell a kid what to do. You said you should be doing this, or you say to a kid, what should you do here? I should pass here. That doesn't mean they can do it. It's knowledge in the game is what we work with. So there's a lot of challenges I think we have in very traditional approaches, that we're working from knowledge about, when really we should be, it's Gibson calls it knowledge in the environment. And it's players' knowledge in the game we need to develop, not their knowledge about.
Yes.
And subtle differences there.
Yes. And there's a much different vantage point as well. Things that may seem obvious to an outside observer are very different than what is obvious to the person in the arena. So I think that is an absolutely critical piece that you just mentioned there. And I love the piece that Vlad talked about, was coaches milling about and asking questions and giving guiding points and giving that affordance to explore and finding what within the game is the key that we need to really hone in on.
And what's key, what Vlad said, is that the guiding is about shaping the player's intentions to information in the game. And that's very important for a coach. If you're giving some sort of an instruction even to a player, is that instruction shaping the player's intention to information in the game? Or are you just telling me, just do this? Because that's pointless. Because
yeah, and there are many ways how you can do it. For example, like in my experience now that I'm working at the university level as a coach developer, that we have guys from coming to study here with numerous cultural backgrounds, say like from Central Europe, from Slovakia, or we have a few North American students, and of course vast majority are Finns. And I could say that there are hundreds of ways for a coach as well how to achieve this, and that is also, as a coach, you're shaped by your culture. And one very vivid example that I've experienced this past Christmas was that as I spent the majority of my time working in Finland, but still my family is in Russia, I get to see two different schools of thought, so to say, looking at how to develop players. And for example, from what separates the Finnish school of thought is that the amount of small area games that are played over here. Nevertheless, in Russia, a very big amount of time is dedicated to one-on-ones. So how do I learn how to solve a problem playing against Greg on a straight attack or out of the corner, and it just goes on and on and on. And if we think about it, there are more or less similar things what we're after, that we're learning how to read and react. Nevertheless, through the hundreds and hundreds of hours of repetitions of playing one-on-one, that's how I learned how to go through someone and then look for passing options. But then at the same time, when I play the game, for example, 2-on-2, then I have a friend that I could play with. I still learn the similar skills of how do I navigate through the opponents into the net to score a goal, but with a little bit different philosophical twist.
I think what's important there, when you're even speaking about the one-on-ones, Vlad, is how you work on them from there's different constraints. As in a player coming from the side, a player coming from behind, a player, you change you change the design of the one-on-one. And this goes back to another great Russian, Nikolai Bernstein, who in the 1930s, and I'm convinced Tarasov read his work, in the 1930s came up with this idea of repetition without repetition with variation. That when Vlad says thousands of repetitions, he doesn't mean this, that. He means it's repetition without repetition. It's repetitions of variation.
Repetition of solving the problem, not repetition of a movement solution.
Yes. It's not about...
Yeah, and then that's the big difference, right? Is are we prescribing solutions, or are we prescribing a process and putting them in the environments? I love that. That's awesome. And Vlad, you just mentioned like both schools of thought, you're learning the same thing and you're still acquiring skills. Is one better than the other? I mean, like what would, if in your mind right now that you've seen both worlds, what is the better process of skill acquisition?
Can't say which one is better. Those something what I can say is that those are different. Nevertheless, you can see the good players coming out of Finland and good players coming out of Russia, and each has own strength. And even when they come from the same country, each of them has a unique skill set that separates them from others. Of course, they have their own cultural flair, for example, but nevertheless, like this is just coming back to what we started with from what Mark said, that every player is a product of a unique cultural upbringing, which is similar to Finland, Sweden, US, Canada, that there are certain forces that shape how we develop, and whether we like it or not, they are there, and it's our job as coaches to find the best possible ways how we grow the ecosystem of ice hockey in our daily practices. I need to understand what are the strengths of Russian culture thought and use that. So I need to, what Mark mentioned earlier, I need to discover and exploit it in order to build better players, so to say. And same way is in Finland. If I know that, for example, that in Finnish school system that a little bit of chaos in the middle school is acceptable, then it's likely some chaos in the ice rink is also acceptable, and coaches are not seen as someone that are that are incompetent if a practice looks a little bit chaotic. Nevertheless, we're thinking about how Russian school system is structured. There is a bit more expectations of things being a bit more organized, but it doesn't mean that within the certain exercise things cannot be chaotic. And we just touched on the way how the Russian mentality is affected by art. So that's the weird mix of the biomechanical and very linear thinking with the artistic and non-linear vision, I would say.
I think, Vlad, that we were kind of leaning on it, touching on it there a while back, is an important thing is that if there's any coaches listening and they're considering how they're working or looking to challenge themselves, and I think I challenge myself in my coaching as much as possible, I think you should consider that this idea that learning is not the process of repeating a solution. It is repeating the process of finding a solution. Learning is not the process of repeating a solution. It is repeating the process of finding a solution. And if you can think about that when you're designing practice tasks and working with players, it'll really challenge you and challenge how you work.
Indeed, Mark. And one other aspect what I want to highlight from one of your previous works was it's not just design, it's co-design. That when we think about the developmental changes that the athletes are going through, say like I started with under 10s, but now I'm working with under 15s with the guys, for 5 years. Chances are that if I do exactly the same thing, that maybe some kids are bored and playing the other sport. So as a practitioner or as a coach, I need to be mindful of what things I need to be integrating into my training design that would be adaptable to the athletes that I have at hand and how they develop across time.
Yes.
Excellent. This was a fantastic conversation. I'm not sure I want it to really end, but we are coming up a little bit on time here. Maybe some open air. I will give some affordance. You use what we've been talking about for you gentlemen to speak on whatever you think is important, what's on your mind, or even where can people find you?
God, it's too much in my mind. I guess we can be found on Twitter. But if anyone wants to drop me an email, it's Mark, and that's Mark with a K, mark.kss@gmail.com. And I'm on Twitter, and I need to look at it.
Here's a lesson: give affordances, but not too broad. There's another lesson for us, right?
Yeah. At MARKSTKHLM. Yeah, that's my Twitter handle. So, yeah, I think it's been a cool conversation. It's really good for me because I don't play ice hockey. I've never played ice hockey. I'm from Ireland. And it's been a fascinating journey that Vlad has dragged me into. So it's really cool. But then the principles I work with in football and the principles I work with in other sports, they translate into ice hockey. The ideas of exploiting gaps in space, ball, puck, or whatever you want to call it, opponent, direction, consequence, representative information. All these things are very much also in ice hockey, and it's wonderful to see the game through a similar lens, like I see football. And me and Vlad, we talk a lot about these things and the commonalities. And I guess in some way we're embracing our inner Tarasov by he's utilizing some football stuff and I'm utilizing some ice hockey ideas, channeling our inner Tarasov.
Mark, I really like the term. We should, really put it as a trademark, maybe. Nevertheless, I want to end with what we started, that as coaches, we should always be thinking about how to innovate our ways, how we do things. And that's what Tarasov has been doing. And Lou Vairo mentioned earlier on your podcast that Tarasov told him that copy is always second best. So we should never copy, but rather think about the ways how a particular drill or a certain coaching point, how would it be useful in our particular environment? How can we adapt it that it is functional with what we do? So copy is the second best, and we should embrace our innovation and creative thinking in our daily work. That's where I think would be a good point to stop here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Greg.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.